Welcome to part 2 and the last part of the respiratory system. Now we need to look at how the air gets into our lungs. What does the breathing using your muscles have to do with getting air in? One of the things that we're going to be looking at is pressure and volume. Volume is the size of a container. Like you have a gallon bottle, jar, or a liter, which is metric system. Not equivalent, but they're not too far away from each other. A cup of water, a cup, the container, that is volume, the size of the container. Pressure, the way to think of it is the force that's exerted inside the container. So let's have a balloon. Okay, the balloon's capable of getting really large, but you're only going to blow it up a quarter of the way. At that point in time, the balloon's volume has a lot of potential, but you haven't finished putting in all the air that you could. There's no way it's going to pop because you put too much air in at this point, because your pressure is not high enough inside. So you have a large volume, even though it's just the potential volume, but the pressure is low. Now continue to blow up that balloon till it's to the point where you can't blow it up anymore. The volume's large, and you've made the pressure inside the balloon almost ready to pop it. So the pressure is the force inside the balloon. There's a lot more pressure in a fully blown up balloon than there is in a small balloon. So your lungs are sort of like balloons. The alveoli fill up with the oxygen in the air that you breathe in, and then they fill up with the CO2 that you're going to breathe out. But in order to get the air inside the lung, we have to make room for the air. So what happens is, when we breathe in air, the pressure outside is about 760 millimeters of mercury. That's at sea level. Of course, you know that if you go way, way, way up in the mountains, air pressure, there's less oxygen up there, and it's harder to breathe. But at sea level, we're okay, and that's where we are in Connecticut. So what happens is the ribs, they have muscles between them called intercostal muscles. And in lab, you're going to see these because I'll demonstrate them. But they draw the rib muscles, the ribs, up and out. Sort of like a bucket handle. They go up and out. And in turn, they're expanding the room for the lungs. Another thing that occurs is the diaphragm, which is the primary muscle of breathing, covers the entire bottom of the lungs. And when it contracts, it lowers itself. It's actually flattening itself. And in turn, your stomach contents get pushed out. That's why if you use your diaphragm when you're breathing and you breathe in air, your stomach can move out. It's because as the diaphragm lowers, the contents in the stomach have to go somewhere, so they're going to move out. Now what happens is, when you breathe in, air pressure is higher outside in the air than in the lungs. It's 760 millimeters outside, and it's 759 or 58. So it's only a little bit lower than the air pressure outside. But remember, everything goes from high to low, higher concentration to lower concentration, higher pressure to lower pressure. And that's what happens. Everything's trying to equal out things. So the air rushes in to the lungs. Now, the opposite occurs on exhalation. The diaphragm moves back up, starting to compress the lungs, make less room in the lungs, and the ribs move back down. So the lung area is smaller, so the pressure has increased inside the lungs. So now the air flows out because the air pressure is lower outside in the atmosphere than in the lungs. So this is just reviewing what I said. During inhalation, the chest expands because of the ribs and the diaphragm. And then the air moves in, and that's called negative pressure breathing. And that's because the air pressure in the lungs is lower than the air pressure outside. And the air rushes from higher to lower. Now this animation is excellent. Little silly when you hear it, and I'm going to put it on because I want to explain it to you. I feel that it really helps explain what is going on with what I've been talking about. And it animates it so that it shows the pressure changes. So I'll go over the animation with you as I'm doing it. Watch it right now for a minute. Okay, right now we have air pressure in the lungs equal to the atmospheric pressure. When you inhale, the diaphragm contracts. It flattens and moves down, just like I showed you in the earlier picture. The muscles between the ribs are called the internal and external intercostal muscles, and they actually move the ribs up and out. Thus, the cavity inside expands, and there's more room in the lungs. So what happens is the pressure drops in the lungs and is lower than atmospheric pressure. So watch this. I'm going to do inhale. Watch the blue and the black lines first, and watch how when you breathe in, how the air pressure changes. Now, atmospheric pressure is not changing at all because you're not moving. So he breathed in, and the air pressure in the lungs was less. Right? See that? Now, you can do that yourself in the course. I will make sure this animation's in there. Now, exhalation, if you saw, the diaphragm goes back up. The ribs move down and in. What's actually happening, and the muscles are relaxing. They're not contracting. So that's why it's a passive process, because everything goes back down to its original position. You're not expending energy. And in turn, the pressure inside the lungs is now increasing. Watch exhalation. Air pressure in the lungs goes up. Air pressure up. Now let's watch it a couple of times. Okay, so we're back. Now this picture basically shows and discusses the same thing that we just looked at. You can see the diaphragm's relaxed in the first picture, and in the second picture the diaphragm now goes down and the chest cavity expands and the pressure in the lungs drops so that the air could rush in. During exhalation, the diaphragm goes back up. and it relaxes. And in turn, the pressure in the lungs is higher, and it's going to push out. Now, what controls this? What happens is it's actually the drive to get rid of carbon dioxide, because during exercise or other activities, CO2 levels in the blood will increase. So when you're exercising, you're breathing in faster and faster and faster, but we need to, how do we control this? And this picture was showing that. It's showing how the brain is influencing how you increase your muscles to breathe harder and work harder. So in turn, the CO2 levels are what drive the whole thing, though, because the brain senses the CO2 levels. So the breathing control center in the brain, which are in the brain stem, you can see them, these two yellow dots, they monitor the CO2 levels. And as the CO2 gets higher and higher in the blood, the body's like, no, 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 you can't get higher. So in turn, it sends a signal down to your respiratory muscles, the intercostal muscles between the ribs and the diaphragm, to tell those muscles to increase how fast they're breathing, which is the rate, and the depth, how much air they're pulling in and how much they're pushing out. As you start to exercise, those levels will automatically increase because of the CO2 levels in the blood. So the brain is monitoring CO2 more than it's monitoring the oxygen. Now, hemoglobin also has a huge impact because it's what carries the oxygen inside the red blood cells. And I'm not going to play these animations. They're all inside the course. But the hemoglobin is what carries the oxygen. And you have 250 million molecules of hemoglobin in one red blood cell. So a red blood cell can carry 1 billion oxygen molecules. And it's what carries and binds to the oxygen. And that's what makes your blood bright red. The venous blood, which is what they take out of your arm, is like a darkish blue, red, violet. And that is because of the CO2. Now you have iron in your hemoglobin, and you're going to see a slide that shows that. So here on the left you can see hemoglobin, and you recall way back that it's a polypeptide chain. And you can see the iron atoms that are there. On the right you can see that the O2 is loaded in the lungs. You have 4 iron molecules per molecule of hemoglobin, but you have 250 million molecules of hemoglobin in one cell. Lot of hemoglobin. So this is showing again how the capillaries are so important. And O2 in the inhaled air goes into the alveolus, and the CO2 is blue, and it's going into the alveolus to be expelled out. So the gas exchange occurs up there. The O2 travels to the left side of the heart, travels in the systemic circulation, does the tissue exchange in the capillary network, and now it's going up to the right side of the heart in order to go up to the lungs again. This slide shows the different lung volumes that your lung has. This is often impacted by diseases, and the total lung capacity on the right side, right next to the swimmer, that is all of the different lung volumes together. Remember, volume is the space capacity, how much your lungs can hold. And the more you exercise, the more fit you get, you can improve the vital capacity, which is the one next to it. That is the volume of, it's a combination of a couple of volumes: forced inhalation, forced exhalation, and tidal volume. Tidal volume is the amount of air you breathe with every breath. So as you breathe in and out, that's quiet breathing, tidal volume. And we may measure that in lab this semester. I will see once we are in class. It depends on the spirometers that we have available. So these are just lung volumes that doctors look at to see if there is some kind of lung problem. Now you have ciliated epithelium. If you remember, you looked at slides. Epithelial tissue is tissue that lines organs and your skin and everything. So you have epithelial tissue that lines the trachea. And in the epithelial cells, you have cilia on these cells. And that is what the bottom picture looks like. It's like little hair-likes. And you also secrete quite a bit of mucus in the cilia. And the cilia wave back and forth, back and forth. And what happens is they actually trap bacteria. But if you smoke, smoke ruins the cilia. They get damaged and can't do their job anymore. So that is often why you develop a smoker's cough. That's part of the reason, at any rate. I'm going to show you what a lung looks like with cancer in it. And that is what you're seeing here. The lungs on the left are nice and pink. The air spaces were good. The volume of air that was able to go in and out was healthy. Now look at the lungs on the right. Now, this was a smoker's lungs, and they developed lung cancer. Not all lung cancers are for smokers. I just want to make sure you understand that. You can get lung cancer if you don't smoke, but the majority are. There is something known as secondhand smoke also can cause problems. And you can see the lung that's damaged. You see where the heart is and the lungs surrounding it. And some of that black tissue is not just cancer, it's also the nicotine from the lungs. So in class, in lab, we have a slide that shows lungs of a smoker. So you can compare healthy lungs to the smoker's lungs. And it's all in the alveoli. They get damaged, so that when you breathe in, there's not a good gas exchange occurring. And that's it for this section. And we'll be going on to the next unit after this.